Hey, it's Chris Schmidt, the Average Joe Sports Show, episode 15. The Huskers fall in East Lansing.
It's Mitch Sherman here. We're going to ask some hard questions about the Nebraska quarterback position.
Hi, it's Bill Doleman. Husker Hoops is getting underway. We'll talk about him.
It's Elijah Herbel here. Let's talk about my Sunday road trip from hell.
Welcome to it, episode 15 of the Average Joe Sports Show. Chris Schmidt, Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, and Elijah Herbel. Find the show on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show. On Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. Give us a subscription. Give us a follow. Guys, it was, a bit testy at Michigan State. Nebraska chance after chance the last 5 minutes or so to try and pull one out. They couldn't. They fall. The 3-game win streak done, 20-17. We all made it back from Michigan, though.
Barely.
2 steps forward. In this case, 3 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
It's going to be the MO for Matt Rule in this program for a little while here at the start, I suspect, and that's what we saw Saturday.
Here's what's most disappointing is that you all did travel to East Lansing. I was back here. I was at a scholarship luncheon for the College of Journalism and Mass Communication, so therefore I did not get to start watching the game until a couple of hours after kickoff. And I'm a little disappointed that none of you called and said don't bother.
Did you do the start it late on delay and try not to find out what had happened, or did you pick up the action in the middle?
Nope. I started from the opening kickoff and watched all the way through, fast forwarding through the commercials. Sorry to the advertisers.
It's very disciplined.
But I was a little disappointed that nobody texted and said, hey, we know that you got a banquet going on. We know you started late. No need to watch the finish.
We didn't know that what your process was here in this. If we would have known,
okay, my bad. Maybe I didn't communicate, but nevertheless, you could have done me a favor.
Yeah.
If we had to watch it, you had to watch it too, Bill. It's as simple as that. We had to sit through that thing.
There were times that I was trying to fast forward, sitting in the press box. Yeah, I mean, like some of those drives that just seemed never-ending frustration. I was looking for the fast forward button, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You look at this situation, and I wonder how many Husker fans are pissed about the officiating. I wonder how many Husker fans are still pissed about the offense. And then there's probably a section of the Nebraska fan base that's like, well, you kind of played with a little bit of fire the previous 3 weeks. It didn't look a whole lot different turnover-wise.
Well,
you got bit this time.
Yeah, the turnovers that Nebraska gave to its opponent were similar. 3 turnovers, and that's what we saw. 4 turnovers the previous week. The problem with this game is the defense didn't generate the turnovers. It was 3-0. And if it had been 3-2 and Nebraska still finishes -1 like it did in each of the previous 3 games, then I think they're coming out of East Lansing with a win. There's a lot of things you can look at about that game and say, if this happened, then they're coming out of East Lansing with a win. But, we can skip over, or we can get back to our trips. I know, Elijah, you have some things that you want to say about your trip, but just to before we get to that, we heard from Matt Rule on Monday, and he was very clear to say that Nebraska's 5-4, and it's going to own being 5-4. And he talked a lot about accountability, and he talked about a conversation that he had with his 18-year-old son after the game, and his son told him to control the controllables. So he's taken lessons from a high school senior, which is good. I take lessons from my 7th grade son all the time. At the same time, we heard about the officials, and we heard Matt Rule talk more about officiating at his press conference on Monday than I think we expected, or at least what I expected going in, and what we generally hear from a head coach after a loss.
Well, Chris just said, I wonder how many fans are pissed off about the officiating or the offense. And as you were asking that question, I was wondering how many Nebraska head football coaches are pissed about the officiating and the Nebraska offense. And I think we kind of got our answer at the press conference on Monday at noon. Matt Rule had a lot to say in dancing around as much as he could possibly say, at least in terms of the officiating. With everything about the offense, we've kind of heard it almost every week throughout the course of the season, where it's on me. Heinrich's got to do a better job, but that's on me. But the officiating was as close to the line as I think I've heard a coach come without just flat out crossing over, even though they could afford the fine.
He might have crossed over. He may hear from the Big Ten.
Well, I think what he said was true and accurate, and how he said it was much more diplomatic than past coaches.
He said it in a very nice way. He said, we all know that the penalty, the pass interference penalty against Malachi Coleman that wasn't called occurred. We all know there was a face mask against Heinrich Haarberg. You know, he didn't say what he thought of them. In fact, he was kind of nice and said, the officials have a job to do and we can't have football without officiating. Where he was most upset was about the replay operation. He was upset that they didn't review the touchdown throw that Michigan State had of 25 yards where the ball appeared to hit the ground, but appeared to come loose from the receiver. And you know, Nebraska fans were incited, the fans not at the game, because they heard Dean Blandino, the Fox official explainer, say that ball should have been a non-catch, and several other calls. You heard about the fumble that maybe should have been an incomplete pass, probably should have been an incomplete pass. We heard about that from the Fox broadcast. And then Rule went back to the opener and talked about the play where Gabe Ervin at the end of the first half looked to have the ball across the goal line, and he was called down, and it was a fumble. I believe that was a fumble. Man,
they just called it. They said he didn't score.
They said he didn't score, and then Nebraska threw an incompletion on the next play.
After Dean Blandino.
Yeah,
it said, no, it's a touchdown.
If it's up to Dean Blandino, Nebraska would be 7-2. And they're bowl eligible. They're headed for Florida. Dean Blandino, he needs to step in. Come on, this guy works for Fox. They run college football. Let's have some action taken here.
Well, the thing is Matt Rule didn't just lay out 2 games. He laid out a third, and this is the first time he's really, I think, publicly said he feels hard-pressed by the Michigan situation, because he listed the 2 touchdowns, and the one against Minnesota, the one against Michigan State, and then he also said it in a third game where we got scouted.
Yeah, you like how you just slid that in there?
That's the strongest thing we have heard from Matt Rule about Michigan in the scouting situation, and saying, you know what, that affected us too.
You know, all these coaches around the Big Ten, you had Ryan Walters taking Michigan to task before and after Purdue went into Ann Arbor and got toasted on Saturday night. There are coaches around the Big Ten who are starting to have it out for Michigan a bit, and in public, which is different than I think we might have expected at this point, but you can only imagine what the conversations are like behind closed doors. So, yeah, Rule, he went there today, not just with the replays and calling out the officials very nicely on some other calls, but also in talking about Michigan. And to be clear, and he clarified this, he's not saying that Michigan beat Nebraska because it had the Huskers signals. In fact, he said, we didn't lose that game because of the situation, which, hey, it was 45-7. I think everybody knows that. But nonetheless, he wants the game to be fair. And maybe it would have been a slightly different outcome. Maybe Michigan doesn't get ahead the way that it does and just kind of put Nebraska to rest so quickly if they're playing on an even playing field, as Matt Rule saw it. I don't know. That's an interesting debate. I think Michigan was that much better than Nebraska on that day. It probably doesn't matter. And if Michigan wanted to win 69-7 without Nebraska's signals, it probably could have. So anyway, some interesting fodder for sure.
Well, quickly back to the Michigan State situation, though. It's something I've been wrestling with, is the fact that the officials were not good, but then you have the coach speak aspect of things as well, where it's, well, you had a lot of chances to go win that football game in your own right. And the fact that you probably had your worst game since Michigan, maybe worst performance of the year given the circumstances, given the fact you're 1 game from bowl eligibility, and you lose the game by 3 points with a number of self-inflicted errors offensively. Your defense has an off day, and it's still just a 3-point loss. That's why I'm wrestling between the aspect of, well, you should have taken the opportunities to win that football game, but on the other hand, if some officiating decisions go your way, the Malachi Coleman pass interference, you have Malachi Coleman getting a first down, but it being called short, which runs 15 to 20 seconds off the clock.
Really big.
You have a fumble by Heinrich Haarberg that could have been ruled as an incomplete pass, which runs some more time off the clock. There's opportunities in there where you wonder, what if the officiating had gone the other way, and it goes by the rule book the way you think it should be. And it's tough to wrestle between those two ideas of, well, Nebraska, it's kind of like Iowa with the fair catch a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about, you know what, they had other opportunities to go win that football game, and you can't be mad about the one call. But on the other hand,
doesn't help.
It doesn't help, and you do have that what-if scenario in your head. If those calls do go the way they should go, the correct way, how different does this game
And
look?
remember, Matt Rule, he has a lot of faith in his kicker these days. I mean, you're talking about a big switch from just a month ago. He said, if we get to the 40-yard line, we're going to kick, and I think we're going to make it. And he's talking about a guy who made a 55-yarder the week before and a 47-yarder the week before that, so you really can't doubt what he's saying. Then the game goes to overtime. I mean, it's not like Nebraska would have won it on a field goal with 10 seconds left. It would have gone, but they would have had the chance to go to overtime. And Nebraska hasn't won an overtime game since I think it's 1924.
Pre-overtime.
Right.
Well, and that's something we can jump into. This is the Average Joe Sports Show, episode 15. That's Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, the AJ Sports Show on YouTube, is where you can subscribe, watch the video portion. Spotify and iTunes is where you can download the audio. Give us a follow on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod.
How about your trip?
My trip?
Yeah.
It was perfect. It was incredible. I mean, I actually was an adult.
I'm happy. I know Elijah's happy for you too.
No, it was as easy as it could have been. Navigating, Mitch, I've never rented a rental car before because I know
you floored me with that fact. In the
What?
box.
No, never. Maybe I'm not allowed. Maybe I'm finally allowed. But no,
You just turned 25?
Yeah, that's right. All this Santa gray on my beard. But no, I rented a rental car. I got across the Grand Rapids to East Lansing.
What was up with your hotel elevator?
Oh, man. The second night we stayed in a non-graduate hotel because it was a little cheaper. And the elevator door was just stuck open because somebody jammed the up arrow in and it wouldn't go up. And I got all this equipment on me. This is before you got there, Elijah. And I'm like, I'm not doing the stairs. So I end up having to elbow the up arrow multiple times. It finally pops out, and then I can get in, press floor 3, and get upstairs. But then it stalled, and then when it opened to the third floor, it was like a scene out of an action flick where you're not level with the floor.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to step up and out before it slams on
That's
you.
a little scary. So my elevator situation was somewhat different. But in all my years of covering college football, I've never missed a portion of the post-game press conference. I've always been able to be responsible enough to find a way down from the press box and get to the interviews. And this week, the game comes down essentially to the last play. So I've got to stay in my seat and I'm writing my instant takeaways to go up on the side on The Athletic right after the game. Game ends, boom, story's filed, head to the elevator. The happiest people in East Lansing were all going up and down the elevator. You can't get on, I can't get on, nobody can get on the elevator because all the fans are using the same elevator. I know everybody feels so sorry. It was take the stairs, find a service elevator, do something. So long story short, I missed the first 4 or 5 minutes of Matt Rule, which is not the end of the world. I mean, Nebraska does tape that and send it out, but it's the rough life of a sports writer on the road when you can't even make it to the post-game interview because the elevator's jammed up with celebratory Michigan State fans. That's where I was at Saturday afternoon.
You were hoping it would have been filled up with dejected Michigan State fans.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they would have sat in their seats and cried for a little longer. That's all I would have cared about, and I could have got down and do my job.
So neither one of you were prepared like John McClane at the holiday party at Nakatomi Plaza where you can use your belt and then, rappel down a little bit and fly over to an open air vent and crawl through to get to the press conference? You didn't think about that?
Start looking at that kind of a situation. But apparently, neither of us had anything close to the harrowing experience that you did.
Yeah. Well, I do want to quickly note here with the elevator situation. I was riding up the elevator to go meet with Schmidt post-game so we could do our post-game show.
So you're the one who had the elevator stop.
No, I'm not the reason.
Did you do the service elevator?
I did. The same elevator that everyone in the media room took. The thing is as I was getting on the elevator, this is immediately following the missed field goal. So I watched the last drive in the elevator. They had a TV in there. And who's walking off the elevator? Is it the same elevator?
You were in a way better elevator than me.
It was
like not my elevator.
It was right in the middle of press row. The elevator right in the middle of press row.
Yeah, that's where I was at. Where I was at.
There's a TV in there.
There's no TV in mine.
The service elevator, the left turn before you get to the main elevator, is the service elevator.
Yeah. Anyway,
it's the Goodfellas entrance.
Anyway, I should just note though that Trev Alberts, he came down from the box and walked past me on my way onto the elevator.
How did he seem?
Following the missed field goal from Michigan State, so he had a little foresight and got down out of there before the final drive.
No, it's smart of him. I wish I would have done that too, but unfortunately, I had work to do.
He seemed professional. Yeah. Walking off the elevator, I couldn't get a sense of his emotions on his face. I'm sure he was disappointed.
There's no rabbit foots in his hand, and he was not rubbing them?
No, but it should be noted, I am struggling to find sympathy for you guys on a Monday. And
Were you in jail? Was that the deal?
I was not in jail. This trip was going swimmingly for me. It was 11 hours out to East Lansing. It was supposed to be 10 and a half. Hit some traffic in Omaha, hit some traffic in Chicago. Ended up being 11 hours to East Lansing. And honestly, the way out there was doable. It felt like 11 hours, but it was never brutal at any point during that drive. Made it through the whole way, got to East Lansing, enjoyed the game, and then immediately following our post-game show, Schmidt drops me off at my car, which I had to park
7 years away.
Yeah, I had to park off campus. They have a great shuttle service. Fantastic shuttle service at Michigan State. There's like 6 buses lined up outside this tailgating area, just ready to be filled up and take you to the stadium. So big ups to Michigan State for that. That was a slick system. It
could take beer on the bus, too.
Yes. So you can take beer and alcoholic beverages on the bus.
I'm not feeling sorry for you
yet. Sounds like a great trip so far.
No, so they dropped me off right outside the stadium. I walk in, watch the game, do the post-game show. Schmidt drops me back off at my car because the shuttle service had ended by the time our post-game show ended. And I make the 3.5-hour trek to Chicago. And it hasn't gotten bad just yet because I had a great night in Chicago, too. I met some friends. Cam and Jackson, they have a spot about mile and a half south of Wrigley. They're in Old Town. So they had
party with some Iowa
fantastic
fans?
Parking. I did party with some Iowa fans. We went to a Big Ten bar in the area, which they had a whole bunch of old Wisconsin jerseys hung up and autographed J.J. Watt pictures and whatnot, and had a great time there. We, on the way back to the apartment, stop in for some late-night Italian beef, which was fantastic as well. So that was great. Wake up on Sunday morning, we watch the Chiefs and Dolphins game, get some burgers from a spot nearby as well. That's all fantastic. Hop in the car. This is around 11:30 local time, noon time, directly after the Chiefs game, and make the roadie back to Lincoln. Things are going well. It's much longer on the way back, and we have the time change too, so the sun goes down earlier, so I'm driving in the dark. And about an hour east of Council Bluffs.
Great area.
Debatable. I hear from the back of my car just a thud sound, and I go, okay, something's up here. And I pull off on the side of the interstate, and lo and behold, my back left tire has absolutely shredded itself.
So it wasn't a body in the trunk trying to get out.
What really happened in Chicago?
We've established that. Okay, so it's a tire.
So you got a flat tire. All right.
Flat tire, and in the dark. I don't have any sort of emergency lights or anything, so I'm in the dark trying to change this tire, not having a good time. Interstate traffic's flying by.
Yeah, I've been calling the roadside assistance there.
It's a Sunday night, so I'm like trying to find any tire shop that's open. No tire shop is open. So I got to resort to the spare
Shocker
tire
there,
which is flat.
Oh no.
I put this spare tire on, and there's enough air that I can at least drive on it, but it is not making it back to Lincoln. So I am now circling through rural Iowa after putting this spare tire on, which, if you saw my picture on Twitter, not a high-quality spare by any means. This thing's a freaking glorified bicycle tire.
I bet Oreo's bigger than that spare tire.
Yeah, it's garbage. Garbage spare tire. So I'm like driving down back roads in rural Iowa trying to find any gas station with air. And I eventually find one, the Easy Go in Marnie, Iowa. I'd like to shout them out if there's anyone in the area. They had free air. It was fantastic. I get it aired up, and I take back roads all the way back to Lincoln, through rural Iowa, through rural Nebraska, all the way back to Lincoln, because I'm not getting on the interstate. My tire is only graded up to 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's
no fun on the interstate.
You were pretty resourceful. You made it back. Thank you.
But I made it back.
You're here.
Yes, I had a dad who taught me how to change a tire from a young age. I'm somewhat resourceful with cars. I can handle myself. I made it back, but total time spent in a car this weekend for Elijah Herbel was just over 25 hours. And yeah, I talked about the roadie to USC last week on this show. After this weekend, my interest level in that has dropped substantially.
Let's do it.
We'll get the Griswold or Heisenberg RV. And
I think that could be a fun road trip for us. We could load it up. I have the opportunity to fly, but go on the road and we could record a pod from the mountains maybe. No?
And the desert.
And just make sure the spare is a little larger than a 33 vinyl LP.
I think it'd be fun, in the first year of these West Coast teams in the Big Ten, to just show the fans a little bit about what it's like from our perspective. To get out on the road. Not everybody is going to fly to these games. I mean, it's college football. You got to drive sometimes. So we can just take the show on the road, and it could be a fun experience.
I did find last week on Facebook Marketplace, if anyone here is interested, an old decommissioned ambulance.
Yeah,
that I think would be a great road trip vehicle.
How many miles?
I'd have to look it up. It was
half a million.
It was a good amount. But if you guys know anything about ambulances, they have really nice suspension in there. It's a smooth ride, a lot of room in the back.
First job in radio, the station vehicle was an ambulance, or as the promo called it, the Bambulance, and it started on fire on me.
The guys from my company, from The Athletic, who used to cover Ohio State, we had a tandem doing the Buckeyes, and neither of them are on that beat anymore. Bill Landis, he's left for another gig, and Ari Wasserman has taken his act national and does podcasts and all kinds of stuff. But they used to drive everywhere and from Columbus. So whether they were going to Piscataway or Lincoln, they just didn't like to drive, or they didn't like to fly, excuse me. And those boys were on the road all the time. So just kind of living the life. They were they don't do that's you can have some fun in that environment, but I'm not sure if I'm up for it for USC next year.
No,
I'm kind of with them though, in terms of there is something special about roadieing across the country to go see college football and be able to see the country that you're driving through, the country that you're getting into, as opposed to just flying over it and you know what, you're spending 24 hours and you're flying out of there. There is something special to be said for being able to see all areas of the country and just seeing some of the landscape around East Lansing, Michigan, for example, or Chicago.
I think it is. I think it is part of the college football experience. I mean, in all seriousness, like you can get in and you can experience some. Did you go to any like great upper Midwestern truck stop, gas station places?
No, I mean I drove past the world's largest truck stop in Iowa, which is a bit of a scam.
If you ever get to Texas, man, if you ever get to Texas and you're doing this around Texas, roadieing to college football games. You know, you have to experience Buc-ee's.
Oh yeah,
Buc-ee's it's incredible.
I usually have my my tumbler here, but I don't.
Yeah,
have
I mean
it
you
with
live
me.
down there, so I'm preaching to the choir with this one. But
yeah, exactly.
I'll go out of my way. 20 miles out of my way, that's fine.
When you know, you know.
Yeah.
Buc-ee's. That ought to be their slogan. When you know, you know. Now I'm all for that, but I prefer to do it on 4 good tires. So if that's in the planning for the future. 4 good tires and a good spare. So
only the Nebraska offense had 4 good tires.
That's the symbolism I'm going with. Is Nebraska's offense a flat tire? Is there air to be had the rest of the season? Can there be enough air inflated into said offense? Quarterback play, O-line, running game, young wideouts, all of them played a part in not doing enough. And Rule, with his Monday presser, said something that really kind of piqued a lot of things that piqued my interest, but he thought maybe Saturday was a game that the offense kind of needed to do their part.
Yeah.
And thought it would.
And thought they were getting there, and they weren't. And, man, let's get into the quarterback for a moment. Haarberg takes a lot. There's a natural cheer for him from so many Nebraskans because he's a Nebraska kid, and, man, he fights hard and he's tough. There's also plays that when you rewatch the ball game, there was some design there by the offensive coordinator, who also takes a lot of flack, that there were plays and yards to be had, and you just didn't see him or scan it, or at least you didn't execute.
I'm trying to think of some players in Nebraska history, like in this sport or even another sport, that you can compare to Heinrich Haarberg, that you just – the fans, they love him and they want to see him succeed so much because he wears it on his sleeve and he takes these huge hits. And you know that while he's got good size and good athletic ability, the overall talent as a quarterback is just below what they need to be able to ride him to wins in the Big Ten.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know that there have been a lot of guys necessarily in football like him. If he was from New Jersey or California, I think he'd be taken even more. He'd taken a lot more heat than he is now, especially after now he helped them win 5 games. The defense gets some big time credit for that, but he was out there taking the snaps, and they needed a spark, and he provided it after the Colorado game. But man, this is really getting interesting now. And I tried to get Matt Rule on Monday to go down the road of accountability for a quarterback versus accountability for running backs in other positions, because we've seen specifically with Anthony Grant where they've had to result to some consequences, i.e. bench him because of his issues with ball security, and the quarterback continues to turn the ball over 3 more times on Saturday. And I get that an interception is not always black and white. It's not always on the quarterback, but the 2 that he threw Saturday were pretty bad throws. And he had a third that got wiped out because of a defensive holding penalty.
That may have been the worst of the 3.
Right. Just didn't see the guy back there in the end zone, no less. And then the fumble, okay, maybe whatever. You can say it was an incomplete pass. It's the bottom line is there's real issues here with the continued turnovers, and Rule didn't go where I expected. You know, he didn't talk about how there's a different standard for the quarterback and how you have to treat the quarterback position differently because of the nature of that spot. But I think really that's what we're seeing is a double standard in this program, not just with how the quarterback is handled versus the running back, but also with how the offense is viewed versus the defense. You know, he said after the game on Saturday the defense just didn't have it. They were a little bit out of rhythm. They were a little bit out of sync. They weren't quite playing with the same intensity that he had seen all year. Well, what about the offense? Because they definitely didn't have it, and they haven't for several weeks. So if they want to get to 6 wins, and they've got another opportunity Saturday against Maryland, something's going to have to change with the efficiency level of that offense.
A couple of things. The game on Saturday reminded me a lot of the Illinois game. It was winnable for Nebraska, but the defensive intensity after the famous Sunday practice, the defensive intensity at Iowa was significantly greater than it was on Saturday at Michigan State. And I'm trying to think. Is it possible that this defense is maybe reading a little too much of its own headlines? Like, can Nebraska's program be at that point where guys are thinking that, you know, we are really good, which they are. They should be confident. But the Illinois effort defensively against a similar opponent was much different than it was Saturday against Michigan State. And, you know, Nebraska fumbled the ball, remember, famously 3 times in the fourth quarter against Illinois with the lead. But the defense could not be overcome by the Illini, and it just wasn't there against Michigan State. So I think that's very frustrating because those were 2 similar opponents, 2 opportunities for wins. They go 1-1 in them.
Which isn't the end of the world when you look at it in the big picture. One thing he said Monday was, "We have learned how to win, but winning in November is completely different." I think that's an interesting that's relevant to what we're talking about right here, because it is different and the intensity goes up, and it doesn't matter if you're playing a 2-6 team. When you get to November in the Big Ten, it's a different kind of challenge. October's one thing, and they went 3-0 in October, and here they go. Hello, November. You got to take it up a notch, and I don't know that Nebraska did take it up a notch from where they were at last month.
I thought they backtracked on offense, and I know the offense has been a struggle for much of the season, but at this point in the year, you go on the road. You've had the success at Illinois, despite the turnovers, and you just really could find no rhythm, fellas, with, all right, am I going to stick with the run game? That seemed to be working, but, man, you got to try and attack them throwing the football so you can't be one-dimensional. And I thought some of the design where, and I know once the ball's let go, there's a bunch of guys that look or air quotes seem wide open, but truly he would lock on to a target initially, and that's where he was going. And that's not new, but you want some progression, literally and figuratively, with what you're looking at on offense, because there were some crossing routes. There were some of the wideouts over the middle on shorter, more makeable throws. And I didn't see as much pocket passing, meaning that was the design. They did attempt to get him on the move a little bit more, at least early on in the game. and it was just streaky. He'd hit a big pass play that you went, wow, and then there'd be some just tough overthrows to guys that were open. And I have a hard time balancing what he can become versus what he is now, and also the offensive coordinator, Satterfield, is he super hamstrung or both hands tied behind his back based on injury and experience level? I mean, I'm trying to justify why they're where they're at.
I think that is legitimate, though. The number of injuries at key positions, especially at the receiver spot, that's significant. And then you lose your two best running backs in Irvin and Johnson. And granted, the difference between Grant and I think even Emmett Johnson and Irvin and Ramir, that's not a lot of difference. It's not as though you're losing.
It's not P. It's not LP and everybody else.
Right, exactly. Although you had him on behind him, but anyway. But yeah, you're not going from losing LP or Rozier or somebody like that, and you're bringing in the walk-on from Battle Creek and saying you got to get it done for a couple of weeks, right?
How dare you say that about me?
I know.
You left Norfolk and McCook out of the fray.
Or you lose Frazier and Behringer, and you've got the walk-on from Wahoo at quarterback. And Nebraska did that for a week or so. There have been significant injuries offensively that I do think you have to say to look. Marcus Satterfield is I don't want to say it's not playing with a full deck. Okay, that's not what I'm saying.
What are you saying?
I am just saying. I'm sounding like Matt Rule at the end of his press conference. I think that you have to. For that offense, you have to chalk it up to this is a lot of unforeseen circumstances that very few teams have had to play with. Now, getting back to the quarterback, however, when did we first see him this year?
It was the third quarter of Boulder. Right?
No. We saw him as an H-back at Minnesota.
Oh, you're right.
We saw him as a tight end at Minnesota. You asked earlier, have there been players who people have been cheering for and rooting for just to find that spot to where they can come on? And two names came to my mind.
Great, yeah.
Tony Veland.
Okay.
Great player out of Omaha at high school, quarterback and defensive back. Got a shot at Nebraska, not going to be a quarterback in that offense. Finds a place in the defense and flourishes, becomes a captain and a legend and a pro player. And Kenny Walker. Who did not love Kenny Walker when he came in from Texas? The deaf player who overcame so much. Nebraska gave him a chance. He was a tight end. And then I think it was a rush end. And finally they said, you know what, you're way too athletic. We have to have you on the field. Play defensive tackle. When that ball is snapped, you go hit the quarterback. Becomes an All-American. Mm-hmm. People loved those guys, and they found a spot. Heinrich Haarberg was an H-back tight end at the beginning of this season at Minnesota. There's no reason to believe that he can't be that in a more natural position at Nebraska and then go on to have a career beyond Nebraska, given his toughness, athleticism, his size. This may be his one season in the quarterback sun at dear old Nebraska U. Now, what's behind him at quarterback next year, I have no idea. Yeah. But his position at the start of this season was catching passes against Minnesota.
Yeah, let's just ask this, to move this, to spin this forward and enter the territory of the unknown. What does Nebraska have to do over these last 3 games to give itself the best shot to have success? Is it ride with Haarberg, or should they look at Purdy and go give Jeff Sims another look? And then the second question is, what has to happen in December? I think whether they go into the portal is no longer the question. It's yes, they're going into the portal. Now I wonder, are you going into the portal to find one quarterback or 2?
Yep.
Go give me 3.
Okay.
I'm serious. Go get me 3 guys and keep the room who wants to stay.
Then you start to enter the issue of you undermine your ability to get a high-end player if you're taking 2 others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm with Schmidt, though, in that Nebraska,
they need numbers.
They need a full reset of that quarterback room. Just if Purdy is not a guy that you can even trust to put on the field at this point in time, I mean, we saw what he put up at the end of last season. I'm not convinced that he's some savior at your quarterback spot that can come in and
otherwise
fix your
be in the game.
Issues. Exactly. Haarberg, which I'm with you guys. I think he's a very gifted athlete, and I think he's going to find his way onto the field. Kind of reminds me of a Taysom Hill type. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason Taysom Hill is not a starting quarterback for the Saints, despite the quarterback merry-go-round they've had since Drew Brees left. There's a reason he's not that guy, and I kind of feel the same way
Great
about
comparison.
Haarberg. Feel the same way about Haarberg. He's valuable enough to have on the field, not valuable enough to be a guy that you want to roll with as your starter. And Jeff Sims, we already know what he is. I think he's probably going to be out in the portal after this season. So I think you need a full reset, but I'm somewhere in between Schmidt and Mitch in that I think you're getting a guy in Daniel Kalen that can come in and at least get some experience as a freshman.
He's going to have to
be a
redshirt.
guy that can learn, redshirt. And then I think you need 2 guys in the portal. And maybe you go the route of Jack Wokey and get a walk-on transfer from somewhere else that you don't have to use a scholarship on. Maybe you go to the community college ranks and find a guy just for some depth, because you do run into the issue of, you know what, if I'm going after a guy that's coming from Texas or Georgia or Alabama, or name your program, the Castaway, that guy wants a guaranteed starting spot.
I need correct evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
I need correct evaluation. Go get me a quarterback or 2 that can play and will perform well, because, not to go back, but you had guys here that transferred out. I know the Smothers situation, he got dinged, but I would love to see what this offense looks like with Logan Smothers. Sorry. I'd love to see what this offense looked like with Casey Thompson. As much run heavy as they are, I don't know how that fits him, but you've got guys that can find wide receivers right now, showing that at different spots in college football. You don't have the consistency you need in the passing game.
Well, yeah. Later this month, I think we'll be able to really zero in on some things and get to some names. And I have some in my head, but I don't know that it's fair to the players at the position right now to throw that out there, or to those guys who are at other schools. Mm-hmm. But as we get closer to the end of the year, I think we'll speculate on some of that, because we can do that. And it's gonna be an intriguing conversation, because as happens every year now in college football, when that portal door opens and there's that immediate rush of players, all those quarterbacks kind of come to the top because it's the most high-profile position, and people in Nebraska are going to be salivating over some of the options that exist out there. But
you got to get them.
You got to get it right. And one thing that maybe this coaching staff can take from what's happened over the past 11 months with Jeff Sims is that you need to do they had a lot on their plate when they all came in after Thanksgiving last year. We didn't know who the quarterbacks coach was going to be until I think January. Satterfield was going to coach the tight ends, and they were going to go get Jake Peets as their QB's coach out of the NFL, and that didn't work out. So it was all in flux. So trying to evaluate quarterbacks from the portal was not. It couldn't be the priority. They're trying to recruit. They're trying to build a staff. This year, you have none of that other stuff going on, knock on wood. So you got to get the evaluation right. And don't rely on the word of another coach. Because Matt Rule, I think he trusted Jeff Collins, the former Georgia Tech coach. I think he looked into his past and said, this is a guy that I've coached with. I believe what he says. And I think he got sold something that probably wasn't based in the reality of the way that Jeff Sims performed over 3 seasons at Georgia Tech. It was what they thought he could be, what they saw from him in practice, what they believed about him as far as his potential because of that athleticism. But you got to watch the film, and you got to look at how a guy performs. And I don't know that it was there with Jeff Sims to believe that he was worth making Casey Thompson expendable and putting all those eggs in one basket, so that what you had behind him was Heinrich Haarberg and another guy who hasn't been able to get on the field.
And you can still see the potential with Jeff Sims when he gets on the field. He's got a world of athleticism. Whenever he does throw the football, thing's a frozen rope. He's got a cannon for an arm. He just can't find a way to protect the football, which is what is important when you're playing quarterback. And Jeff Sims is a guy, I wonder about him about a position switch moving forward with potentially 2 years of eligibility.
Well, we know that you want him to play running back. Yeah.
I want to ask real quick about Chubba. I mean, what is not happening Monday through Thursday in practice? And I know you've ridden Haarberg. He's been your guy. But at some point, you made the decision to move off of Sims, go with Haarberg, and you're entering into November. Is it a panic move, possibly, or is it a move that could help your offense perform better? Could he take better care of the football? And what I've seen of Chubba is in limited action, so it's not as many reps or plays as you'd like, but he's had some turnover issues too, at least when he's been live.
He was very frazzled when he played in 2022. And I don't know that that's fair to him to believe that he would play that way if he was put in the game in 2023. But the coaches are seeing something from him in practice that isn't allowing them to get him on the field. Because I don't think it's just an issue with Heinrich Haarberg where you worry about ruining his confidence if you sit him down, or you think that the team is not going to respond well to that different voice in the huddle. I think they're to the place now 10 games into the season, having played 9 games, entering the 10th game here, where they can handle it. They're big boys. And if Heinrich has to take a seat because Chubba needs to get a look, he'll handle it fine. And if you have to go back to Haarberg, if you do go back to Haarberg, then that's great. He'll be ready. He'll be good to go. I think they should have confidence enough in this team at this point that they're mentally tough to the place where they can handle a look. They can handle some experimentation at the QB position, and I'm all for it at this point. I say if you start on a sour note against Maryland and it's not his day throwing the football, then give the other guy a shot. It's I think no matter how it's looking Monday through Friday, give him a shot. He's on scholarship too. He's shown that he has some talent at some point in his career to get to this place. And what do you got to lose? It
seems to me with Haarberg that his value as a runner is what Nebraska covets offensively. Jeff Sims can run the ball too. We saw that in the couple of games that he did start, but holding on to the ball is another story. Now, when Haarberg is running with the football, doesn't seem to be that much of an issue. I think it's his value to this team that he is their best threat with the ball under his arm. Yeah. Throwing the ball, that's a weakness, and it has not progressed positively as the season has gone on. He's hit some big strikes. The touchdown pass to Malachi Coleman. He's fairly decent in connecting with Fedoni, who I think is emerging as a guy who's going to have a long career in the NFL. But I think for Heinrich Haarberg, when it comes to can he run the football like we need the quarterback to do, far and away better than anybody that they have. Maybe not far and away better than Sims, but at least he gets to where he needs to go with the football in hand. Purdy's not a runner. And I think that if you put him in there, that's going to take away something from that offense. If he gets in there, it's to throw the ball.
I would agree with you only from the standpoint that we have to base it on what we've seen and what the confidence that the coaches have shown in him. My only takeaway can be that they don't believe that he can run this offense. And you can't change the offense at this point. You got to go with the system that you're running right now, and it goes against what they say about Chubba Purdy, because the coaches have said that he's a great athlete and that he runs the option well and that he has good speed. So at this point, you can only go off of what we've seen, and his absence from the games, it speaks volumes. So he must not be able to run the kind of stuff effectively that they're doing.
And look, Nebraska moving forward, moving beyond this year, Haarberg is going to be given a chance to be the guy again next year. Do they need to go to the portal? Absolutely, they have to go. And you're right, Mitch. I think that we all kind of look around at rosters and going, that guy might be, and that guy might be, and we'll see where Nebraska goes. Haarberg is not going to get through the end of this season, and as I suggest, would find a very productive home elsewhere in that offense and what they want to do. He's a great athlete, no question. He's tough, he's fast, and he's got a Nebraska way about him. But he's going to be given a chance, and when they bring in the competition through the portal, in all likelihood, that's who's going to get the attention next spring and fall.
I don't want to throw dirt on his career as a quarterback, and he is going to get that shot in the spring, I think, to compete with whoever they bring in. But you imagine him as part of this offense in a package where you put him and Thomas Fedoni and Carter Nelson out there?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Like Elijah said, Taysom Hill is a great example of what they do in the NFL with him in New Orleans and have for a long time now, right?
And I'm not saying him as the quarterback. I'm saying him as an H-back / tight end.
That's what I'm saying too. Yep. Yeah. That's where he started the season.
Yep.
Well, it's the multipleness of whenever Taysom Hill's on the field. You have to understand, what? This guy could shift in and play quarterback, or he could stay at tight end and be a blocker, or he can come in and tote the rock. You know what? third and short, Taysom Hill's in the football game, he could be the guy that's taking the quarterback sneak. It's just the amount of things the defense has to prepare for when Taysom Hill's on the field is why the Saints pay him that money. And I think that potential for Haarberg moving forward is exciting in what you can do with it. But I think we can all sit here and understand, based on what we've seen this season, Heinrich Haarberg is not a top-level quarterback that Nebraska needs for the kind of success that it wants moving forward.
I'm interested to see him continue to grow and keep getting better. And Rule did touch on the fact that the guy's excited for the challenge and learning on the job, to fairness to Haarberg. So, with not much time under his belt actually getting practice and reps until this season, what is his ceiling? I don't think we know that either. I just know that you need more options than what you currently have on the roster to get better quarterback play.
And if he can fair catch a punt, he'll make the field. He'll get on there.
We haven't even talked about that.
The Oliver Martin School of Fair Catching, Nebraska's got that down pat.
Yeah, that was difficult to watch all the fair catches, and many of them inside the 10.
Rule took the bullet on that one on Monday, and he said that's on him for sending Billy Kemp out there with the instructions to make a fair catch, and that's a head scratcher. That was a little troubling to hear him say that in the post game, that Billy didn't really have the green light to run with the ball, and he hasn't been cleared to the point where he's ready for contact. So probably shouldn't be. I know they really want him to be able to help the team, and they like what he does and the kind of leadership that he's brought, but Ethan Nation, or somebody who had the ability to run with it. You look at the Michigan State punts and the way they flipped the field. There were 3 inside the 15 that Kemp fair caught, 2 inside the 10. Man, you start those drives at the 20 or the 25, because those were booming kicks. Nebraska was going for the block. Their strategy on punt block / return Saturday was to go for the block. So they didn't have the blockers coming down the field to get to the gunners and set up the return. But that required an adjustment. And while we were talking about the special teams last week as a strength of this team during the win streak, they lost the special teams battle pretty badly because of the punt situation. And Brian Buschini had an off game, too, against Michigan State. And that again, you talk about -3 in turnovers. Well, you lose the punt, the special teams battle. Man, the fact that they lost that game by 3 points is,
right.
Quarterback play,
disappointing.
Special teams, defense, turnovers.
Replay review.
Replay the zebras.
Replay review, yeah.
and I'd like to make the offensive line did not have the same kind of performance that they had against previous opponents.
No, they blitzed. Sparty blitzed once, and they dropped 7 or 8 in the coverage consistently.
They said, "Hey, Haarberg, come beat us."
Yeah, absolutely.
They just dared him to beat him, and he didn't have the arm to do it on Saturday.
And whenever they did bring that one guy, a lot of times they brought him from some weird places. With an offensive line group that hasn't been together, is trying to get their communication down on the road. The environment wasn't too hostile, but it is still more hostile than playing at Memorial Stadium. They would bring a guy from a weird spot. The slot corner came a couple times. They'd scrape a linebacker on the edge. They brought some different looking blitzes too that the Husker offense.
We've probably talked too much about a game that people don't want to relive. But the last thing I'll say is it was bizarre because all the stuff we've talked about, and on top of that, Nebraska wasn't penalized. For the first time in a game since 2005 against Maine, Nebraska goes penalty-free. There were a couple called. One was declined, and one was an offsetting penalty. So no penalty yards against Nebraska. And still, you look at it and say, well, the officials, they hurt Nebraska badly, and all this other stuff happened. It's going to be one of those games like Minnesota at the end of the year when you look back and you say, well, man, Nebraska needs to get to bowl eligibility so it's not having a lot of really difficult self-reflecting moments in the months of January through July.
Later on in the week, we'll drop another pod. We'll dive into the Maryland matchup. We'll get into the West race. And, these final 3 are going to be
the latest on Michigan, what's going on in college football. Should we talk about a couple other sports around
we could. I mean, you've got Nebraska and Fred. Huskers hoops tip-off tonight. Nebraska women's basketball underway. And
they won by 100? Is that
right?
I
think pretty
something
close.
like that. And Britt Prince is all in.
How about Britt Prince? That was one of the biggest moments in recent Nebraska women's basketball memory. to get the superstar high school point guard out of Elkhorn North committed to Nebraska on Sunday. I mean, she was coveted by schools from coast to coast. This is a legit 5-star kind of talent and somebody who's going to be the face of that Nebraska program from the day that she walks into the door. So big recruiting win for Amy Williams to do it against not just the in-state rival Creighton, where Britt has some connections. She plays volleyball with the daughter of the Creighton volleyball coach, and there are some ties to Elkhorn North at Creighton. But also, to beat out schools like Indiana, Oregon, and many others that make deep runs into the NCAA tournament on an annual basis or a regular basis to come to Nebraska, where Amy's still building this thing. Big moment and a big day, and I'm happy. From like a selfish standpoint, because I've loved watching Britt Prince play in those Class B state tournaments. She's 3 championships. They did it as a first-year school at Elkhorn North with her mom, Ann, as the coach. They're going for 4 in a row this spring, and exciting that we get to continue to watch her hoop for a few more years.
And
the biggest pickup probably for the Husker women's team since Jessica Shepard, which is a very similar story. In-state 5-star,
right.
top 5 player in the country.
Right.
But she ends up transferring after 2 years and going to Notre Dame, where she won a couple of national titles. I think she's off in the WNBA
She's in the
now.
WNBA.
But that's the kind of era we're talking about. And Jessica Shepard was a huge piece of that Notre Dame team that went and won a couple titles. She didn't do it for Nebraska, but that's the kind of level we're talking here of maybe not program changing, but program defining over the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think Britt Prince can be program changing, and you hope that she's got a different path. For sure, not personally, but just with where she plays her college basketball than Shepard did. But, I mean, the comparison that people tried to make quite a bit on social media was, okay, Nebraska's getting their Caitlin Clark. And, look, Caitlin Clark is a generational player on the national level. She's taken women's college basketball to a different place as far as national interest and viewership and getting Iowa to the national championship game. So pump the brakes there a little bit on that comparison. I don't know that Britt is just like stylistically, she's not the kind of player who's going to be putting up 40-foot jumpers, coming across half court and shooting it. She's a great shooter, but she's she's an athletic all around. And Caitlin Clark, leads the country in assists every year, but it's a different kind of player. So don't think it's Caitlin Clark dressed in red, but every bit. I mean, extremely exciting moment. For women's basketball.
I just want to say that'd be like getting a running back commit for the football team and being like, well, Nebraska got their Bo Jackson.
Yeah, right.
Well, I would not be shy of saying that maybe they got their Jordy Ball.
Right, this is Jordy Ball.
Jordy Ball is a Nebraska kid who went to Oklahoma, won a couple of national titles, and has come back and is a phenomenal player. And perhaps Britt Prince might be that kind of player for Nebraska women's basketball, who's a program that's on the upswing. I am never sold on commitments until they sign on the dotted line, and really until they walk across the stage and actually get their degree and spend an entire college career in one place these days. But when Mom tweets it out, as Ann Prince did, with a little video with Britt and little pictures of her being a camper at Amy Williams' camp and playing at Elkhorn North and interspersing pictures with Nebraska women's basketball, when Mom tweets it out, I'm thinking that might be a pretty solid commitment. So good on them, and a feel-good story for Nebraska basketball moving forward.
And like Jordy, with the coming to the camps and the pictures with Amy Williams, and there's the value of coaching continuity. I mean, at some point, Kirk Ferentz, when the moment arrives and the writing is on the wall and you have to move on, you have to move on. But Nebraska has with its women's sports, and John Cook and Rhonda Revelle, and now Amy Williams establishing what she has. This is the reason that they're able to get players, even if it's coming back home out of the portal, like Jordy Ball and like Britt Prince, because they grew up with these coaches, seeing them at camps and taking pictures when they were little girls. And Nebraska volleyball has been doing that for multiple generations. And it's exciting to see these other two sports following their path. And, that while we're having this discussion, the volleyball team is now on a track to go into Black Friday unbeaten after getting through Penn State in that 5-set win on Friday night, which I watched sitting in my hotel room in downtown Lansing, wanting to go to bed because it was an 11 a.m., noon Eastern, whatever. I don't have to get up that early. But it was an early kick, and I was glued to the TV. And then I watched the BTN Originals film after that was really well done. So it was a volleyball night on Friday night, and Merritt Beeson is making a case for National Player of the Year.
I'd agree with that, Yep.
Average Joe Sports Show YouTube is where you find us. The AJ Sports Show on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Last thought, guys. Hoiberg and company, pretty talented roster. Loves this group. They get things tipped off Monday night. And I think what I'm most excited to see is Tominaga, stay healthy, but take that next step. And there's a lot of confidence he can do it. But just the versatility around this roster Fred has, where you've got some big dudes, some experience, and some guys that can protect the rim. So Nebraska will want to do it multiple ways on offense and defense. And you got to feel good about what Fred has. I don't know, outside of Michigan State and Purdue and Illinois, those are the three big dogs in the league this year. Indiana's pretty good as well. But it seems like, I don't want to say down, but doable year in the Big Ten for Nebraska to maybe climb the ladder a bit.
Yeah, maybe. It's always going to be tough. But maybe if there's a year, the stars have never aligned, or have the stars ever aligned for Nebraska basketball?
1994 in Kemper.
At times, right, in the regular season or in a conference tournament, but something always gets in the way. And early in this preseason, it's looked like it was going to be injuries, and I hope so we're able to see the potential of this team, that they get healthy and that they stay healthy. They've got a big one coming up on December 3rd, which is closer than it seems, against Creighton. And the top 10 Blue Jays come into PBA. So I think until that game happens, people are going to take a real cautious approach with this team, as you tend to do with Nebraska men's basketball. They should get off to a good start, though, with this schedule. Let's just hope. Now, we're taping this before the Monday night game.
So Monday goes well for
Fred.
Fred.
If disaster strikes Monday night,
we're striking this from the records. What we're doing.
Everything that we have said on this whole episode and just shut down the operation. They should beat Lindenwood.
This is the most user-friendly schedule Nebraska men's basketball has had in a long time. And there have been a couple of user-friendly schedules down the pike where they got knocked off day one or game two, and it's like, how did that happen? But for the non-conference schedule, there's just enough directionals and hyphenateds that you should come through with a pretty healthy record going into conference play in December. And then for the most part, even the conference schedule looks fairly doable for an upper division finish in the Big Ten. I think that this is Nebraska's best chance to get to the dance, and I'm going to say it, win a game.
Well, and dare I say,
build a statue.
Dare I say, for the first time in a long time, maybe dating back to Petaway, if not probably James Palmer, Nebraska has a guy that they can turn to when the going gets tough, that you can just say, you know what, this guy can go take over a basketball game. And you know what, he's done it against the likes of Evan Fournier.
Okay, so you're talking about Keisei.
Professional guys. Yeah, Keisei Tominaga is a guy that you can turn to when the going gets tough. And I know he's a little bit limited with just his size compared to a college basketball floor, but his great equalizer is his shooting. And I think against a directional school, a school like Lindenwood, name the non-conference foe for Nebraska this year besides Creighton, you can say, you know what, if the going gets tough, we have a guy we can turn to that can go take over a basketball game and go win it for us. And Nebraska hasn't had that in a long, long time.
They're going to miss Griesel. That heart that he had in that 1 year, you could tell that was one guy who was going to enjoy his one season where he always wanted to play. They're going to miss that.
And you wonder if, and I know it probably doesn't have the offensive ability, but if Josiah Alec can just bring some of that intensity in that
his sister shows.
Right. If he can be, and he's there courtside at the Devaney Center, dressed up, supporting her. So I like to see that, and if that's a little bit of a preview of what he brings, what that Alec name brings to the basketball court, that'll be. She's
the key to the season this year for Nebraska basketball, bringing some heart and soul.
We've unlocked it.
Becca Alec.
Guys, we'll be back at you later on in the week. The Average Joe Sports Show podcast. Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, the AJ Sports Show. Subscribe on YouTube. Give us a follow on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. We'll talk to you next time.